The United Kingdom will have a new prime minister for the third time in less than 2 months. Rishi Sunak will take over for Liz Truss, becoming the first prime minister of color and first from a non-Christian background in British history. A lot of firsts involved with this pick. The former finance minister is tasked with navigating the UK through high inflation and also a fractured Conservative Party. For more on that, let's bring in Paul Hannon from London now for more on all this. He's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Paul, welcome to CBS News. Economic cycles can be measured in years, sometimes decades, and yet prime ministerships can be a matter of weeks. How can the next one enact policies that are going to change a pretty gloomy big picture economically there in the UK?
Good afternoon, and I'd just like to reassure you that we normally don't change prime ministers 3 times in 7 weeks, which is what's just happened. I think the new prime minister, who will probably be appointed tomorrow by King Charles, or at least invited to form a government by King Charles, he'll be focusing mostly on sort of calming down the market turmoil that was instigated 3 weeks ago by this surprise package of big tax cuts at a time when inflation was rising. So I think even though there are a whole bunch of different challenges that are facing the UK right now, that will probably be his top priority.
You know, Paul, one of the things that he has mentioned about Liz Truss, governance or policies, calling her economic policies something out of a fantasy, out of a fairy tale. What is Rishi Sunak expected to do differently? How are his policies, or what you know from what he believes in the past, expected to change the economy in the UK right now?
I think he'll stress the need to, as the Conservative Party here puts it, live within their means. What Liz Truss was doing was pretty unorthodox by Conservative standards. She was planning to borrow a lot of money in order to cut taxes, and a lot of those tax cuts were going to benefit quite rich people. Mr. Sunak is probably going to go in the opposite direction. He's going to try and cut borrowing. He may have to do that by cutting spending, which of course would hurt people who are already facing a pretty difficult winter with high energy costs.
You know, Paul, you mentioned that the UK is usually a little more stable than 3 prime ministers in 7 weeks. But if you pull back just a little bit, I think it's the 6th prime minister in 6 years or 7 years, or it's 5th in 6 years. It's the turnover seems to be increasing. Something's going on there. I don't know if it's about the ideas or about the connection that each minister has with the British people. Sunak comes in with tremendous wealth at a time of tremendous suffering. How does he win the public over?
That's a very good question, and it's going to be a really big challenge. He doesn't necessarily have a very sort of common touch, so to speak. He hasn't really had to kind of reach out and make that connection in the past. So it is an open question about his political abilities. People are generally pretty impressed with him on a technical level. He seems to understand what he's talking about when he talks about policies, but he can come across as a little bit wooden, a little bit stilted, a little bit sort of anxious in public, in contrast to at least one of his predecessors who was, pretty relaxed and did make that kind of connection. So yeah, there's kind of designing the right policy, and then there's getting people to buy into it and build confidence. And that maybe is going to be the hardest thing for him in the next 2 years.
Well, we'll see how he rolls up the sleeves and puts his head down and do the work. Paul Hannon, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.